Yes, it's time for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, sport, showbiz and beyond. Tonight, the Conservative MP Danny Kruger, who represents the historic market town of Devizes. I knew I'd struggle with that. Devizes in Wiltshire, and I've been practicing it all day. He first made his name in the party behind the scenes as speechwriter to David Cameron, before becoming political secretary to the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson. That was, of course, in the run-up to 2019. He voted Leave in 2016, sees Brexit as an opportunity and believes our best days lie ahead. Danny Kruger, MBE, welcome to GB News.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Good to be with you.
It's great to have you on the programme, and thank you for joining us at the 11th hour. Danny, what made you a Conservative in the first place?
Good question. I was always a Conservative. I was a different sort of Conservative when I was younger. I was a Thatcherite, small state libertarian. Then I read Edmund Burke at university and realised there's more to life than, you know, the pursuit of self-interest and the invisible hand of the market, important as those things are. And I became a communitarian and a believer in tradition and in the inheritance of our country. So, you know, I mean, I grew up as the child of entrepreneurs and obviously had a prosperous, stable upbringing. My parents were immigrants to this country from South Africa, so I've got a sense of loving this country, as it were, from the outside, even though I was born here. So I've got a mix of impulses, I guess, but I'm just an instinctive Tory. I know in my guts that it's right.
But you were the recipient of an MBE, upon which I congratulate you for your work in the community. Incredible work. For over a decade, you founded Only Connect, a project working in prisons to stop criminals reoffending. Danny, is the prison system working? And if not, how do we fix it?
It's not working. It's absolutely terrible, I'm afraid. It's a sad indictment of many generations of worthy efforts to reform it. We send too many of the wrong people to prison. We don't catch enough criminals, obviously. We have a chronic crime problem. We have a chronic reoffending problem. So the prison system is not fixing the criminals that we send in there. And it's no surprise because they spend 23 hours a day lying on their backs, watching TV and dealing drugs to each other. So, you know, the system is, I'm afraid to say, letting down both the general public and the potential victims of crime, because it's letting down the criminals themselves who urgently need reform. And it is possible to reform most people, and we should be much more ambitious about what we can do with the prison system and with the justice system as a whole. I'm not sure that we should be sending everyone we do send to prison, while we also need to be catching the serious criminals and putting them away for longer.
You worked closely, Danny, with Boris Johnson leading up to his landslide election victory in 2019. Was it a mistake to evict him from power?
Well, I think he evicted himself in the end, and I deeply regret it happened. As you say, I only worked with him up until the election, and I saw what he's capable of when we needed him, you know, in those months when we were in a stalemate in Parliament and there was no prospect of breaking the logjam except by his courage and determination to do it, and he followed a really good plan. So, you know, I will always honour him for that. But I'm afraid, I think by the end, when it came to it, the support in the party had just fallen away, and he hadn't done enough to shore it up. And obviously, COVID, we can all blame COVID, and you know, and rightly, that was the undoing of him. But I'm afraid, yeah, it was inevitable by last summer. Yeah.
I've got no doubt that Rishi Sunak enjoys your fulsome support. I think that shares in Rishi Sunak are too low. That's the theme of my big opinion monologue, which people can watch on Twitter at GB News. However, notwithstanding your doubtless support for our new Prime Minister, what does he need to do better?
He needs to reassemble the coalition that swept us to power in 2019. We have lost millions of voters back to Labour, to fringe parties on our right, and worst of all, to apathy and indifference and disillusionment. And Boris's achievement in 2019 was to mobilise people who believed in our country, believed in the potential of Brexit and of conservatism, and they spanned the whole nation. and we brought in voters who'd never voted for us before, as well as mobilising our own base. So that's the challenge, and we're not doing it sufficiently at the moment. We can all understand what happened last year, which led to Rishi coming in with a very, very difficult political situation. He hasn't yet been able to turn the polls, but it's early days, and he's doing the primary job that he came in to do, which he had to do, which is to stabilise our position as a nation economically and to stabilise our position politically as a party and as a government. The challenge now, over the next 18 months until the election, is to be more radical, more authentically conservative, but in a way that genuinely connects with those floating voters who might or might not vote for us. And that isn't easy, but I think there is a route to it. And it's about reconnecting with that 2019 coalition. So it's being much more successful and tough and getting it right on the small boats and on immigration. I think that means leaving the ECHR. I don't think we're ever going to fix the small boats problem without that. There's economic reforms that need to take place, which we could discuss. But the other thing I would mention, and I think is crucial to our appeal, and it wasn't something that Boris made much of, but I think is really crucial, it's investing properly in families, making families feel that the government's on their side, making the tax system work for families with children and with dependent adults, with older parents who need support. There's a whole set of reforms I think about that being really authentically pro-family, as well as supporting the community life that we all depend on locally and that is so crucial to people's sense of identity and their sense of security. So investment in families, in communities, and getting the national story right, particularly around immigration, I think that's the path to victory for us.
You've had an amazing career, former chief leader writer, opinion columnist for the Telegraph newspaper, also great charity work. I mentioned that prison organisation, and also you've done work with the youth, with young people and children. And of course, you were chief speechwriter for David Cameron, who I would humbly suggest is a very underrated Prime Minister in what was an underrated government, the coalition government, who inherited an economic crisis but very much steadied the ship with the Lib Dems over 5 years. On a future occasion, we'll have to have that conversation. Before we let you go, because we've got the papers coming in and we need to get to those shortly, a quick word on your rather talented mum. She's nearly as famous as you, Danny. The entrepreneur, restaurateur and cook, star of Bake Off, Prue Leith. Just one question. I'm assuming you had a delicious childhood.
Yes, I had that question before, Mark, and I always answer yes, I certainly did. The good thing, though, my father was very traditional in his taste, so we didn't get any fancy food growing up, and so I've inherited that. And I like, bangers and mash, and my mum does that pretty well. So yeah, I ate well as a child. Yeah.